Okay, so this week there's another spaceflight news episode. We hope you forgive us, but there were really some topics that we still wanted to talk about and that we couldn't talk about in Monday's episode. And don't worry, of course, we don't forget our beloved electric cars. Next week we will talk about electric car news again. So the Cargo Dragon capsule now successfully docked to the ISS on December 8th, making the CRS-19 mission to the ISS a full success. Then Boeing Starliner launch is now set for the 20th of December, and the wet dress launch rehearsal was already performed on the 6th of December.
Meanwhile, the Crew Dragon in-flight abort test might still take place this year, with a bit of luck. So when can we then finally see the Crew Dragon ferry the first astronauts to the ISS? And not long ago we did a future space timeline of events, which admittedly got a bit out of hand towards the end. But surprisingly, many people still liked it. Therefore, this time we will try to do a future timeline on when and how Mars colonization will happen. So stay tuned for this highly interesting space news, and now this time not even so unrealistic timeline.
Now last week on December 5th, a Falcon 9 successfully lifted off SpaceX's Cape Canaveral LC-40 launch pad, successfully injecting the Cargo Dragon capsule into low Earth orbit, the Cargo Dragon having now successfully docked with the ISS on December 8th. The Falcon 9 landed not even 10 minutes later on the drone ship Otsisley. We will now always call it Otsisley because, of course, I Still Love You is just far too long for us, making it the 39th successful Falcon 9 landing. 39th. And keep in mind, Falcon 9 only exists since 9 years. And the first Falcon 9 booster landings took place, astoundingly, only 4 years ago. And now this has already become total routine. This is how fast reusable rocket technology has actually progressed. This is what the aggressive engineering approach and philosophy at SpaceX is enabling. Fail often, fail hard, but become really good, really fast in the process. So the Cargo Dragon will stay docked to the ISS for a few weeks until re-entering the Earth's atmosphere again around the 6th of January, marking this cargo capsule's third successful mission to the ISS.
And the funny coincidence is that only 24 hours after the Falcon 9 liftoff, a Soyuz rocket started from Baikonur spaceport with a Progress spacecraft also to resupply the ISS. Now, contrary to the Dragon, the Progress will be docked to the ISS for a few months. It will then at some point re-enter Earth's atmosphere and completely burn up, because it's not reusable. Meanwhile, over at Cape Canaveral, the Starliner CST-100 capsule is now firmly mounted on top of a ULA Atlas V rocket. And preparations are underway for the first uncrewed test flight for the Starliner on the 20th of December, where the Starliner will dock to the ISS, the same way the Crew Dragon already did more than half a year ago. A wet dress launch rehearsal was already performed on the 6th of December. In that rehearsal, the Atlas V rocket was fueled, the entire launch countdown was practiced, and everything went well. So the chances seem very good that we will still see the Starliner docked to the ISS by the end of this year. Now just imagine, we will see a Cargo Dragon, a Progress cargo freighter, and a Starliner docked to the ISS by the end of this year. That will certainly be quite a sight to behold.
Now, as you can imagine, SpaceX is meanwhile of course not sleeping, and they want to make sure that they will be the first ones ferrying astronauts to the ISS. By the way, the first time from US soil again since almost a decade. Now, in order to make sure that this timeline holds and that the first crewed flights to the ISS with Crew Dragon take place before Starliner will also ferry astronauts to the ISS in 2020, the very important in-flight abort test of Crew Dragon is scheduled to take place as soon as possible. Although we now have the latest info that the earliest possible date will be the 4th of January. That would mean that crewed flights to the ISS will probably already start taking place before the mid of 2020, and that would be amazing.
Okay, now enough of this mundane low Earth orbit spaceflight stuff. Who cares about the ISS, right? After all, it's all in large part the freaking ISS's fault that we don't have our beloved moon bases yet. What we do care about, however, is how and when we are finally going to land on Mars and establish permanent bases there. So we already did a timeline in this video here a few weeks ago, but this time we want to focus on Mars and not venture into the too distant future, as then it becomes more and more wild sci-fi, and in the end it becomes really impossible to say what might really happen. So let's start.
Now we think we will see the Mark III Starship prototype reach orbit in 2020 and assembly of the Super Heavy booster by late 2020, maybe early 2021. Now sometime in 2021 we might see the first flight of Super Heavy together with Starship, probably the even lighter and more advanced Mark IV, and what better way to demonstrate the superior capabilities of the new Starship by trying to directly land the Mark IV Starship prototype on the Moon in 2021. Therefore, we think that the first cargo mission to the Moon will actually take place already in that year 2021, but still without orbital refueling. Now, in order to max out payload, the Mark IV then lands on the Moon and remains there, already serving as a future moon-based shelter in itself, because this thing has a gigantic interior pressurized volume of 1,000 cubic meters. This thing is already a huge moon-based shelter in itself. Now hopefully we will also see some moon versions of Cybertruck being deployed, along with a few Bigelow habitat modules, which would be really nice because we think they are a very good choice for setting up a base on the Moon.
Then in 2022, orbital refueling is tested and perfected in order to drastically increase payload capacity to the surface of the Moon. Another Starship lands there, delivering even more cargo. Starship and Super Heavy production seriously starts to ramp up because new giant revenue streams from Starlink start pouring in by that time. Also in 2022, a Mars orbit transfer window arises, and we think that Elon already wants to send at least one, probably even two Starships towards Mars in that time frame, where they would arrive half a year later. One might fail to land, the other one might successfully aerobrake and land, delivering the first cargo to the Erebus Montes region, one of the preferred future landing sites on Mars. Meanwhile, the success of Starship on the Moon leads to NASA embracing more and more the idea to validate Starship for crewed Artemis missions to the Moon. Yusaku Maezawa's privately funded Dearmoon mission in 2023 further convinces NASA to charter Starship for the Moon landing in 2024. Voices to scrap SLS altogether are getting louder and louder. In the 2024 Mars time window, two further unmanned cargo Starships will be sent towards Mars, delivering power modules, Cybertruck design-based Mars rovers, propellant plants, expandable habitats, solar-powered drones, and 3D regolith printers to the Erebus Montes region, where said drones already start to prepare Mars bases for the arrival of future colonies. 3D printed regolith domes will first serve as radiation protection against solar and cosmic rays, together with the thicker atmosphere at Erebus, offering enough protection for the first Mars colonists.
Now then finally in 2024, Starship then lands the first astronauts on the Moon, further validating Starship as the space transport system of choice, with a lunar colony being built immediately afterwards, using also the cargo and shelter provided by the two Starships that landed in 2021 and 2022 respectively. Now in the 2026 window then, the first crewed flight to Mars with a new version of specially designed radiation-shielded Starships insulated with the newest hydrogenated boronitride nanotube shielding takes place, consisting of two Starships being attached to one another and rotating around their common center of gravity in order to create artificial gravity for the Mars trip. Now this latest iteration of Starships then will also have the capability for an Earth return trip, as their mass will actually be low enough, made possible by further refining the 30 times cold rolled steel used for Starship and further decreasing the weight. Because propellant generated from the propellant plants is ready by then, the Starships then being refueled and sent back to Earth in the next time window. The three cargo Starships from the 2022 and 2024 time windows then serve as secondary bases and backup shelters.
In 2028, further Starships arrive, bringing more and more colonists to the now growing Erebus Mars base. The first Mars-designed boring machine arrives by that time in disassembled form, where after assembly, work on the first underground rotational habitats starts. Our base on Mars is now planned to have the living quarters underground for better radiation protection and for overcoming detrimental low gravity effects by means of rotation. In situ resource utilization is being perfected more and more. Ores and minerals are being harvested for use directly on Mars. By 2030, the Erebus base has grown into a small colony with over 100 inhabitants. Regular Starship travel to and from Earth is being established by that time. New modes of propulsion, such as Starship 2.0 with nuclear thermal engines, might drastically shorten the voyage times, thus dramatically increasing the amount of people that can be transported to Mars. By 2032, the Erebus colony has grown beyond 1,000 people. New colonies are being built, spreading out from the Erebus side. An underground net of hyperloops is established, connecting the colonies.
Now, by the end of the 2030s, in this scenario, we could see the population of Mars growing beyond 10,000 people. Now, granted, here we get more and more into speculative sci-fi territory, and actually everything beyond 2 years in the future probably already is. But looking at how far SpaceX has actually come in the last 10 years, it is not unreasonable to assume that this timeline might actually happen in a similar way. Of course, with the possibility of a few years of delay, but still it might kind of play out like this. And of course, the only relevant vehicle, the only one that will make this happen is Starship and none other.
So what do you think about our future Mars colonization timeline? Are we being too optimistic, or do you think it's realistic?
I think it's extremely realistic and 100% accurate. 100% confirmed.
100% approved by Elon.
And who do you think will make it first to the ISS? SpaceX's Crew Dragon or Boeing Starliner?
And if you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe, because we regularly upload 2 videos per week and we always tell you our honest opinions on the latest developments in space.
Yes, even if the opinions are totally stupid, we still will tell them, right?
So see you next time.
See you!